This is the broadcast from City Hall, the home of the Greater London Authority. Please stand by. This is the broadcast from City Hall, the home of the Greater London Authority. Please stand by. This is the broadcast from City Hall, the home of the Greater London Authority. Please stand by. This is the broadcast from City Hall, the home of the Greater London Authority. Please stand by. This is the broadcast from City Hall, the home of the Greater London Authority. Please stand by. This is the broadcast from City Hall, the home of the Greater London Authority. Please stand by. This is the broadcast from City Hall, the home of the Greater London Authority. Please stand by. This is the broadcast from City Hall, the home of the Greater London Authority. Please stand by. This is the broadcast from City Hall, the home of the Greater London Authority. Please stand by. This is the broadcast from City Hall, the home of the Greater London Authority. Please stand by. This is the broadcast from City Hall, the home of the Greater London Authority. Please stand by. This is the broadcast from City Hall, the home of the Greater London Authority. Please stand by. This is the broadcast from City Hall, the home of the Greater London Authority. Please stand by. This is the broadcast from City Hall, the home of the Greater London Authority. Please stand by. This is the broadcast from City Hall, the home of the Greater London Authority. Please stand by. This is the broadcast from City Hall, the home of the Greater London Authority. Please stand by. This is the broadcast from City Hall, the home of the Greater London Authority. Please stand by. This is the broadcast from City Hall, the home of the Greater London Authority. Please stand by. This is the broadcast from City Hall, the home of the Greater London Authority. Please stand by. This is the broadcast from City Hall, the home of the Greater London Authority. Please stand by. This is the broadcast from City Hall, the home of the Greater London Authority. Please stand by. This is the broadcast from City Hall, the home of the Greater London Authority. Please stand by. This is the broadcast from City Hall, the home of the Greater London Authority. Please stand by. This is the broadcast from City Hall, the home of the Greater London Authority. Please stand by. This is the broadcast from City Hall, the home of the Greater London Authority. Please stand by. This is the broadcast from City Hall, the home of the Greater London Authority. Please stand by. This is the broadcast from City Hall, the home of the Greater London Authority. Please stand by. This is the broadcast from City Hall, the home of the Greater London Authority. Please stand by. This is the broadcast from City Hall, the home of the Greater London Authority. Please stand by. This is the broadcast from City Hall, the home of the Greater London Authority. Please stand by. This is the broadcast from City Hall, the home of the Greater London Authority. Please stand by. This is the broadcast from City Hall, the home of the Greater London Authority. Please stand by. This is the broadcast from City Hall, the home of the Greater London Authority. Please stand by. This is the broadcast from City Hall, the home of the Greater London Authority. Please stand by. This is the broadcast from City Hall, the home of the Greater London Authority. Please stand by. This is the broadcast from City Hall, the home of the Greater London Authority. Please stand by. This is the broadcast from City Hall, the home of the Greater London Authority. Please stand by. This is the broadcast from City Hall, the home of the Greater London Authority. Please stand by. This is the broadcast from City Hall, the home of the Greater London Authority. Please stand by. This is the broadcast from City Hall, the home of the Greater London Authority. Please stand by. This is the broadcast from City Hall, the home of the Greater London Authority. Please stand by. This is the broadcast from City Hall, the home of the Greater London Authority. Please stand by. This is the broadcast from City Hall, the home of the Greater London Authority. Please stand by. This is the broadcast from City Hall, the home of the Greater London Authority. Please stand by. This is the broadcast from City Hall, the home of the Greater London Authority. Please stand by. This is the broadcast from City Hall, the home of the Greater London Authority. Please stand by. This is the broadcast from City Hall, the home of the Greater London Authority. Please stand by. This is the broadcast from City Hall, the home of the Greater London Authority. Please stand by. This is the broadcast from City Hall, the home of the Greater London Authority. Please stand by. This is the broadcast from City Hall, the home of the Greater London Authority. Please stand by. This is the broadcast from City Hall, the home of the Greater London Authority. Please stand by. This is the broadcast from City Hall, the home of the Greater London Authority. Please stand by. This is the broadcast from City Hall, the home of the Greater London Authority. Please stand by. This is the broadcast from City Hall, the home of the Greater London Authority. Please stand by.
Can I welcome members, officers and the public here in the chamber or watching on the webcast to today's meeting of the Audit Panel. Please make sure your electronic devices are switched off or to silent mode, and ideally not the buzzing silent mode. Can also ask guests and members to position the microphone so they can be heard clearly, moving it closer to you by picking up by the base if needed. I don't know why that always has to be in there, because we're an experienced lot here, aren't we? We know how to operate a microphone. So can I start by asking our clerk, Paul Goodchild, if any apologies have been received?
Thank you, Chairman. Apologies today from Assemblymember Fortune, and Assemblymember Sheikh is on her way.
Eminently excellent. So before we begin, I'd like to welcome all of our guests who will be joining us at various parts of today's meeting. Normally this is quite a short item, but I've got a page and a half of names. So if you can just bear with me, I do make a point of welcoming everybody here, but it is a cast of thousands this afternoon. So we have Enver, who's the Interim Chief Finance Officer of the GLA, who's here in person. We have David Esling, Head of Audit Assurance and Risk Management at MOPAC, who's here in person. We have Mark Woodley, Group Audit Lead at MOPAC, who's here in person. We have Karen Welsh, Senior Risk and Assurance Editor of MOPAC, who's joining us via Zoom. We have Rory McKenna, the Monitoring Officer at the GLA, who's here in person. We have Janet Dawson, Head of Government and Public Services Assurance at EY, who's here in person. We have Chloe Wilkinson, Senior Manager at EY, who's here in person. We have Alex Conway, Deputy Deputy Greater London Returning Officer of the GLA, who's joining us via Zoom. We have Shanzida Chowdhury, who's Multiply Programme Manager at the GLA, who's joining us remotely. Tamida Rahman, who is the Multiply Senior Project Officer at the GLA, who is joining us remotely. Tim Steer, Executive Director of Housing and Land at the GLA, who's here in person. Simon Powell, Assistant Director of Land and Development at GLA, who's here in person. That's the end of the first page. We have Navprit Rai, who's Assistant Director of Communities and Social Policy at the GLA, who is joining us via Zoom. And finally, Daniel Drismiller-Milgram, who's Equality and Fairness Manager at the GLA, who's also via Zoom. We got there in the end. So that's item 2. Now, declaration of interest. Can I ask the panel to note the recommendations set out at item 2 and ask if members have any other interests to declare? Nope. Excellent. Item 3, minutes. Can we confirm the minutes of the meeting held on the 20th of December 2023 to be signed by me as a correct record? I'm sure we can. Good. Item 4, summary list of actions. Can we note the completed and ongoing actions arising from previous meetings of the audit panel? Excellent. Silence. I'll take as enthusiastic agreement. 5 brings us to our first sort of substantive item. External audit results report. So we are joined by Janet Dawson, Head of Government and Public Services Assurance at EY, and Chloe Wilkinson, who is Senior Manager of Audit at EY. If you could introduce the GLA audit results report for the financial year ending the 31st of March 2023.
Thanks very much, Chair. Yes, in front of you, you have the final audit results report for the year ended 31st of March 2023, the substantive contents of which you already have seen at your October meeting, but this now concludes the work that we carried out, and I'm very pleased to say that we provided our audit opinion on the financial statements for 22-23 yesterday evening, so those accounts should be going up on the website with our unqualified audit opinion and no exceptions reported within our value for money assessment. The report sets out the key risk areas that we looked at during the audit, the work that we did, the audit adjustments that we identified, and the other areas of reporting requirements that we are required to bring to those charged with governance, which is the Mayor in this case. So this has all been reported through to him, and we're bringing it to the panel so that you can see the full scope of that work and the outcome of it. I'm happy to take any questions.
Excellent. Well, I think I don't know that I have any questions, really. I suppose the discussions that we had before, of course, were around the delay caused by the LLDC, so I suppose I feel obligated to ask that those are happily put to bed and you're satisfied with where we got to with all of those property valuation issues.
Yes, those are all concluded, and those accounts have also been signed off, so these consolidated group accounts reflect their statement of accounts and their clean opinion. Okay,
I don't have any further questions. The rest of the panel? No? Well, we had a longer introduction than we had an item, but thank you very much. I mean, it's when we have a clean bill of health and a happy audit that we have a very short item. So thank you very much for all of your work, and thank you very much. You're obviously free to leave since you're not here for any of the other items. Thank you.
May I just say thank you very much as well to the panel. This is my final audit panel. I have to rotate off for mandatory rotation purposes, and so I will be replaced by my partner, Stephen Reed, for the 23-24 audit year. So it's been great working with you, and I'll hand over to him. Chloe will remain on the team.
Well, thank you, Janet. We can certainly minute the work that you've done to get us to the clean bill of health that you've just given us with. I'm sure Steve will continue the excellent work. I've seen an indication from Enver.
I just wanted to thank the team for the great work, but particularly Janet, as it is her last year, and for all your cooperation and all the wonderful advice she's given us, and for actually helping to get this year over the line before we start next year, which is quite novel at the moment in this country. So thank you very much, Janet, for that.
Thank you, Ember. Okay, thank you, Janet. Thank you, Chloe. So that can I ask members to note the contents of the External Auditor's Greater London Authority Audit Results Report? No. Excellent, well noted. Item 6, this is usually where we spend much of our time, the internal audit reports. So we have a series of appendices, as usual. What is not usual, actually, one of those appendices, Appendix 8, concerns the GLA land and property governance, including management of land assets. This item has been provided to members only and is reserved from publication. And so should members wish to discuss the contents of this report, and perhaps I can deviate slightly from my script and say that I personally probably will, and therefore we will need to take that item at the end in a closed session. This is where I asked the panel, but since I've already said that I intend to, I don't need to do that. So, under Standing Order 2.2D, I propose to take item 6, Appendix 8, as the last item of business at the end of all of the other pieces of business that we have first. So that brings us to our sort of the rest of our internal audit reports. So we're joined by David Esling, Head of Audit and Assurance, and Mark Woodley, Group Audit Lead, and online by Karen Welsh, who is the Senior Risk and Assurance Auditor. David, can I ask you to introduce each report, and then relevant officers can expand further?
Okay, thank you, Chair. Start with the Appendix 1, which is the progress report. This details the progress that's been made on our work since the 7th of December to the 20th of February. As you will see there's a number of reports that are coming to this meeting, which we will talk to individually. It also sets out the work that's currently draft and also the field work that's underway. I think it's fair to say that because this meeting is slightly earlier, it's probably good for me to say that this work, the majority of our internal audit work will be completed by the end of March in the field work, and then we will bring those to the subsequent July meeting.
Okay. The reason for the timing, of course, I'm sure you know, but just for the benefit of those who don't, we've got a bit of fixture congestion because we have the election period starting on the 19th of March, so we have an awful lot of meetings to get through between now and then, and there's not time for all of them to be in the last week. So
totally understand that. And there's also later on we'll be bringing the audit plan for 24-25 that's at draft, and we'll welcome comments from the panel on that. The item 3 on the progress report sets out our counter fraud work. I think the one area I'd like to just flag there is really the National Fraud Initiative work that's still ongoing, and details the number of matches across the range, the group, and we're working on those to ensure that they're settled. And I'd like to report by again the next panel on the exact clearance of those matches. And the final thing is obviously just mentioned the performance. We plan that the majority of the fieldwork will be completed by the end of March. That's really it on the progress. I'm willing to take any questions on that. Otherwise, I'd like to then, if okay with the panel, I'll move on to the plan, our draft internal audit plan for 24-25.
Nobody's waving at me, so proceed.
Okay, thank you. So this sets out the approach that we take, and just very briefly, we undertake a risk-based approach to internal audit, which is as set within the public sector internal audit standards. So that's taking the key strategic risks, the GLA, we look at those, we look at previous work that's been undertaken, and then through discussion with senior management, we put together the plan, which is set out here, and on page 26, 27, you will see the areas that we propose undertaking our work for 24-25. I think it's fair to say that this is an indicative plan, so that means that should the risk profile change or if any of those areas drop, then we will, it will be adjusted, and that would be brought to obviously subsequent audit panels to identify those areas where we have moved. But at the moment, this is the draft plan as set. And again, willing to take any comments, any questions on the detail of that.
I suppose not to foreshadow what might come later, but can we assume that DLAP would fall under the Housing and Land bit? Sorry, GLAP, my apologies. Is that likely to form part, without going into what we might be talking about later, presumably it feels that there might be some follow-up work on that item.
So from that, what we will be doing from that report, we will then be doing a follow-up report, which will come into, be part of the follow-up reports for in next year's plan.
Okay.
So that I think that's on the follow-up reviews. You'll see that's probably the last one. There's 5 days suggested for that. So as with all follow-ups that we undertake, we're not just following up what was undertaken at the original review. We will look at changes that would have occurred in the system and also be given a subsequent opinion on that. So yes, that will be covered in the 24-25 plan.
Okay, I don't think I had any other questions. It looked a sensible plan. Anybody else? Nope. Okay, so let's move on to, I believe that's Appendix 3, the Mayoral Assembly elections 2024.
Yeah, I'll hand over to Mark, who'll give the detail on that. Thank you.
Thanks.
Okay, thank you. This is an audit of planning arrangements for the mayoral and Assembly members' elections 2024. This audit reviewed the processes in place for the preparation for the mayoral and Assembly elections and included a review of project plans, implementation of lessons learnt, contract management processes, resourcing including training and budgets in place, allocation of venues and reporting arrangements, including contingency planning. Excuse me. We recorded a substantial assurance rating where risks are managed effectively to provide assurance that business objectives will be achieved. We made one medium risk recommended action, which was accepted by the GLA. Our findings were that the Greater London Returning Officer and Deputy Greater London Returning Officer have been appointed for the management of the elections and are supported by an established elections team. An elections project plan is in place, has been prepared and clearly shows objectives, deliverables and timescales. Regular monitoring of the project plan takes place. Contract management arrangements are in place for issuing ballot papers, the elections management system, elections booklet and the supply of ballot boxes. Count centres have been identified by the boroughs and the GLA portal is in the process of being established to enable regular sharing of information with boroughs. Training is in place for polling station officers and GLA staff relating to election procedures at City Hall. Contingency arrangements are in place in the event of loss of premises. Appropriate working reporting arrangements have been identified and are in place internally and with key stakeholders. We made one medium risk recommendation, and that was that the risk register is reviewed on a regular basis and details of the review, including date and officer reviewing, are clearly shown on the register. That's it. Thank you.
Thank you. I mean, I suppose it's not a novel thing to have an election and the team running it are experienced at running it, so it's not unexpected that we're confident that we know what they're doing. I suppose the big unknown this time around is the possibility of a general and the GLA on the same date. And my understanding is that the last date at which a general election could be called would be after the election period begins for the GLA. I don't know whether that's a question you can answer.
I think Alex may be on the line. He might be able to.
Alex is giving us the thumbs
a bit
up.
more information than me.
But so my question was going to be: Are we confident? So firstly, is that correct that we could have that sprung on us after we think we've started our process? And secondly, are we confident that we can manage all of that if we have those elections on the same date?
Thanks, Chair. I'll take the question, and I'm the Deputy Greater London Returning Officer as well as the AD for economic development. So when we started planning the 24 elections, was mindful that the Fixed Term Parliament Act had been abolished. We always knew there was a risk that elections could be on the same day, and it would be fair to say that all our planning last year was based on exactly that assumption that we would have both elections on the same day. And that's why we've made sure that we've ordered enough ballot papers, enough ballot boxes, have count venues booked for the Sunday and Monday, because essentially if the general election is on Thursday, that takes precedence in terms of counting, and the GLA election will be counted on the Sunday rather than the Saturday. So we are making those assumptions. We heard what the Prime Minister said about penciling in an autumn election, but we don't assume that means that the spring election may not happen. And exactly as you say, oddly enough, the general election could be called when we're 1 week into the GLA pre-election period. So we and boroughs are fully prepared for those contingency plans. It will be quite a big job if it happens. There's going to be a lot of votes to count. There's a lot to contend with already in relation to sort of voter ID, and of course one immediate effect of the GLA elections is that will be that there'll be many more votes to count, because general election turnout is usually quite a lot higher. But we are, our plans were made fully in the knowledge of this possibility, and indeed all future GLA elections, of course, may also coincide with general elections. So we need to plan this way from now onwards.
Okay. Do you know what the actual date is? Presumably you've got it marked in your calendar as the date at which you definitely don't have to have them together. Is it the 20-something?
I think it's the 26th. I think you're right.
Okay. Okay. Kripesh, you had some questions.
Just about individual boroughs, because I think there's a recent announcement from government about reviewing the workings of Tower Hamlets Council. Are you looking at sort of announcements that come up in relation to individual councils, and is that do you feel that there's an impact there?
So we work closely with colleagues at Tower Hamlets, and since that announcement of the best value inspections into the borough have been made, we've spoken to them about whether that may affect delivery of the GLA election. I mean, I have to, obviously we'll keep that under review, but we're working closely with them. I don't think it necessarily should. I mean, you know, the you know, issues in Tower Hamlets that relate to, you know, the particular party in control there and other issues, you know, shouldn't impact the sort of GLA elections. You know, there's a well-established elections, you know, and very professionally run elections team at Tower Hamlets. So our expectation is that will continue. Obviously, if anything changes as a result of that government review, then, you know, we'll consider what it means, but it should not impact delivery of the GLA elections.
Thank you. That does provide assurance, and I think, Mark, I think you alluded to something in your remarks about having that avenue to continue review anything that happens anywhere across London.
Yeah, I think that was the constant review of the risk register and the reporting of that. Yep, that's covered in that area.
Something that's just come to me, because I think obviously this will be the first election in mass election in London where the voter ID, the photo ID requirements are in. Is there provisions or support being provided in terms of the training that staff at polling stations will have? Because there has been occasions elsewhere in the country where people are faced with anger if they feel they're not able to vote because they haven't, you know, they're doing what they've done every election and turning up, giving their details. Is there provision for that support for local councils and count staff?
Absolutely. So we're very mindful that, so one, we've been able to learn quite a bit from the introduction of voter ID in councils outside London. Also, we're saying that, I mean, by now there's actually been a fair number of by-elections and similar events in London. We've got the Lewisham mayoral election in a couple of weeks, less than a couple of weeks. And you know, they'll be learning from that as well in terms of the numbers of people impacted in voter ID. I think if you know, generally that's been quite reassuring in terms of the number of people who do turn up with the correct ID. There's a lot of work that, and hopefully you'll have seen some of the work that Borough's Electoral Commission and we ourselves will be doing to promote awareness of the need to have voter ID and the correct ID. That will be stepped up in coming weeks. The statutory booklet that gets delivered to every voter has the photo ID details. The poll cards that are delivered to every voter will have the details. And when people get to the polling station, staff, of course, are being trained to request the ID, to explain circumstances around ID, to explain some of the sort of sensitivities around ID. For example, if somebody is wearing a mask or a burqa. So, you know, there's a big programme of work in hand around this. And, you know, of course, we'll be keen to share our learnings with the Electoral Commission and others as to whether there's anything that can be improved for future elections.
Thanks very much. I don't think I have any other indications, so thank you very much, Alex. And if we move on then to Appendix 4, which is the Mayor's London Multiply Programme, where we have Tamidar Rahman and Shanzida Chowdhury, who are joining us remotely. So, okay. Mark, if you want to kick off.
This isn't a systems audit, but we were commissioned by the GLA Skills and Employment Unit to undertake an audit review to confirm compliance with the GLA Multiply funding and performance management reviews for the 2022 to 2023 funding year. The GLA London Multiply programme aims to provide targeted numeracy provision to adults aged 19 years and above. We carried out reviews of the funding claims that were made by 6 education providers. Audit reports for each education provider have been prepared and issued to each provider detailing the outcome of the audit review, containing key risks identified. Each audit report includes an action plan containing recommendations for the provider to address and for details of the officer responsible for the action and a target date for implementation. A total of 18 recommendations were made, and education providers have provided actions to address the recommendations, and it was agreed that all the recommendations will be implemented by April 2024. This isn't something that DARA will be following up. The GLA multi-provider managers will be informed of the audit results and will be obliged to follow up with education providers on the recommendations outlined in their individual reports. It will be closely monitored and handled during performance review meetings. That's it, thanks.
Thank you. So I suppose the one issue that sort of jumped out at me was this question about residency. So students are required to be London residents according to the funding rules, but there's a question mark about whether we're certain that they are, whether people who are therefore not eligible might be getting the funding. I don't know. Just looking online, we should have Tamida and Shanzina. I don't know whether you're able to help us.
Hi, Jeff. Thank you. Thank you for your question. To address this question, I think what was part of the audit, what the auditors have found is that there may have been some of the evidence that's submitted by the providers in terms of supporting documentations for learners may have not been very clear when it came to the residency. For example, there's two parts. So the audit is split. It's split in terms of financial audit, and then there's the data side of things. The data side is that learners are recorded through what we call the individual learner records, the ILR. So what our auditors did was they checked on the ILR if a learner was recorded as a London resident, compared that against what was submitted by the provider in terms of evidence for the learner. So if there were any discrepancies, it was picked up. It was then spoken to and reported to the provider and asked for further clarification. But as a requirement for the funding, it is crucial that a learner is a London residency, alternatively they are not eligible for this funding.
So I apologise if you did answer. I don't know if it's my ears or your audio, but it sounded slightly muffled in the room. But so you're confident then that this was a problem, but isn't a problem now? So we're confident going forward. We're confident that the people that we have that we're enrolling are residents and therefore eligible.
Yes, we are confident. Providers are aware of all the funding rules and regulations tied to this funding, and yeah, there aren't no concerns. And these are, if there are any minor errors, these are picked up as part of our performance meetings and adjusted, and evidence is provided.
Okay, understood. Thank you very much. I don't know. I see someone I can't quite read from here. Is that Shanzina who's just put her?
Yeah, hi. Yeah, I thought
I
I'd just. Yeah, sure. Thank you. I just thought I'd pop in. Yeah, basically, it's a definite rule that all 56 providers across London know about, that they need to record that registration information. And I think what the audit quite rightly picked up is that there is that discrepancy, like Tam was saying, between the ILR and then that registration data evidence. So what we're doing is kind of, we're talking to providers to kind of look at why that mismatch has happened. So we're rectifying that. But generally, yeah, all London learners, and they have to share that registration information when they register for each short course on the programme. So yeah, just to let you know that where those discrepancies have happened, we are my team are going out there and meeting providers and taking those steps to correct that. But generally, all 56 are very aware that the learners need to be London. So I just wanted to reassure you on that point.
Okay, that's. Thank you very much. I don't see. Oh, I do see an indication actually. Assemblymember Harani.
Yeah, just on the recommendations and those that were not accepted. So I can see it's two from I think North Hertfordshire College and one partially accepted from Bromley. What are the reasons for those recommendations that were not accepted?
Yeah, sorry. So the recommendation from North Hertfordshire, they have withdrawn their contract with the multiply funding, so therefore that funding has been taken away from them. So that's stopped there. And in terms of Bromley, it was to do with misunderstanding on certain expenditure, but it has been spoken to them now. We've spoken to them and it's been accepted in terms of understanding moving forward what they need to do. But as for this specific report, they have they have accepted the most recommendations as far as I was aware. I'm just having a look quickly.
I think it was a case, Tam, of they just needed a bit more clarification. So I think they've now received that clarification and they have accepted that. So I hope that answers the question.
Not really. I'm just a bit. It's not really clear, to be honest. So it's just so from what I'm hearing, are you saying that it's no longer partially accepted? It is accepted because
it has been accepted. Yes.
Due to clarification, so there's an update since this.
Yeah, I think instead of what they should have done is not rejected it. They should have sought clarification and then kind of, but they prematurely didn't accept it. But we've gone back and clarified with them the position, and then they have accepted it now. Okay. So sorry, that's an amendment.
That's fine. I'm clear now. So that's helped. And just to also clarify, so for North Hertfordshire, the case is it's not been accepted because essentially it doesn't matter anymore because that agreement or
they're no longer running the programme. Okay. Yes, they withdrew their allocation. So it doesn't hold anymore.
Thank you.
Okay, thanks very much. I don't see any other indications on that item, so thank you very much, Tamado and Shanzina. I think we are now, if we move on to Appendix 5, which is the Horizon 2020 Research and Innovation Framework Programme, not to be confused with any other Horizon programmes that might have appeared at any other committees.
Yeah, fortunately not, no. Clever Cities is a European-funded project to trial working with local citizens to co-design the regeneration of urban areas to make them greener and healthier. London was chosen as one of the 3 lead cities, along with Hamburg and Milan. This audit was carried out to assist in evaluating whether the GLA's costs declared were in accordance with the terms of the grant agreement. We examined the grant claims submitted by the GLA and reviewed the records as necessary and carried out a series of tests to confirm the accuracy of the GLA's grant claims. We found that direct personal costs were reconciled to staff hourly rates and timesheets for those staff involved in the programme and were also matched to the GLA's financial systems. Subcontracting costs were matched to signed agreements and GLA procurement rules were followed. Other direct costs were for eligible expenditure and evidence was obtained to support the expenditure. The correct exchange rates were used to convert the amounts claimed into the euro currency. We also found that the GLA had maintained adequate records to enable us to report on this claim for payment of grant. The independent audit report that we've completed has been attached to the final GLA claim, which has been sent to the European Union's Horizon 2020 Innovation Action Programme. So this was a grant return. We're just checking that they've followed the rules of the grant. So.
Okay, I don't think I had any questions. Did you have any questions, Kripesh? Okay, well, I suppose when things go well, we don't really have any questions. So that takes us, so Appendix 6, which was the expenses and benefits governance framework, including carbon offsetting procedures, has been withdrawn. So that takes us to Appendix 7, which is Community and Social Policy Unit Financial Hardship Team.
Okay. The GLA aims to help Londoners to access the support they need to avoid or escape financial hardship and mitigate the worst effects of the cost of living crisis. We reviewed the effectiveness of the control framework in place for the Communities and Social Policy Financial Hardship Team. We examined the arrangements in place for the delivery of services and the mechanism by which service performance is monitored. We also looked at the activities undertaken by the Financial Hardship Team, including working arrangements with partners, monitoring arrangements, budgetary control and reporting arrangements. In order to do this, we selected 3 areas to review from the Financial Hardship Work Programme. These were the Holiday Hunger Programme, Advice Citizens, London Citizens Advice and London Legal Support Trust Networks, and finally Advice in Community Settings. We concluded an adequate assurance rating in that risks were generally managed effectively, although improvements in the application of controls are required. We made 4 recommended actions, of which 3 were accepted and 1 not accepted. We found that accountabilities, roles and responsibilities have been identified and allocated within the Financial Hardship Team with clearly defined objectives. Funding has been adequately allocated to programmes and approved, and monitoring of budgets takes place on a regular basis. There's regular monitoring of performance of programmes takes place between the Financial Hardship Team and external evaluators, and key performance indicators have been identified and reported on. Any issues identified are promptly identified and addressed. 3 agreed actions referred to The recommended standard templates included in grant agreements are to be used for the submission of information by all delivery partners to the GLA. All recommendations from external evaluations are captured and recording on a standard template, including details of the officers responsible for the recommendation, the status of the recommendation, action taken and target dates for implementation. A standard actions template is to be introduced to capture all actions from partnership meetings. The template needs to include the action owner, date of meeting, updates on the action, and whether it's been open or closed. The one recommended action that wasn't accepted referred to the collection and review of feedback from the recipients of advice.
Thank you, Mark. So we're joined online by Navpreet Rai and Daniel Drillsman-Milgram on this item. Hello. I'm not sure which of you are...
Hi there. Hi, Chair. I'm here, Dan Drillsman-Milgram. I don't believe Nav is able to join us, so I think it's just me.
Fair enough. Okay. Well, I suppose the question I had then relates to the recommendation around sort of dealing with issues of dissatisfaction and customer service. I know, obviously, on audit we're primarily, I suppose, concerned with governance and process and risk and so on. But if we have unhappy people and we're not finding out that we have unhappy people, that does seem like a bit of a problem. So I don't know if you can talk us through what's going on there and what were your reasons for not accepting the recommendation.
Yeah, sure. So I think one of the first things to say is that we do, through the evaluation that we've commissioned, there is quite substantial engagement with the recipients of the services that takes place. Some of that, for some programs, is through surveys, but I think generally it's through extended interviews. I think the concern with the way that specific recommendation had been framed was that it would essentially put us in the position, which didn't feel quite appropriate, of trying to sort of set up a quality assurance process for the delivery of those advice services that essentially already exists and is delivered by specialist organisations. And so you'd have this situation whereby we would essentially be duplicating something that organisations are, or certainly should be, subject to. So I think our view on the on the recommendation was that the appropriate way for us to be reassured that the advice services being delivered to people through this project is through making sure that those organisations are subject to the appropriate charter marks, advice quality standards that already exist and are delivered through organisations like the Financial Conduct, the FSC, the Office of the Immigration Services Commissioner, where relevant, or compliance with the advice quality standard. And given that those are existing standards that are already in place, I think the recommendation that we then sort of seek to create our own kind of quality assurance framework, which we then ask those organisations to be subject to, was something that we just didn't think was quite the right approach. I think the only other thing to say on it is that one of the points that we sort of clarified through the process of this report coming together is these are projects that are underpinned by funding agreements, grant funding agreements, rather than contracts for goods or services. And I think the relevance of that is that they're not, the advice services are not ones that have been set up from scratch solely for the purpose of what we're working together on. Generally, we are providing funding that supports an existing service, and like I say, which is already subject to the appropriate quality assurance. And so, the idea of us then seeking to establish a separate standalone quality assurance framework, it just felt like it wasn't an appropriate thing for us to be doing, and it held that real risk of duplication for the organisations that we'd be asking to be in compliance with it.
Okay, I mean I suppose that's logical, but I suppose I don't want to tie you with the brush, but I suppose we looked here at Solar Together and we had a similar discussion there, where there was talk of accreditation, and ultimately one of the problems was that the people doing the installations were not doing it properly. We were generating a very large number of very unhappy people, and it seemed to take a very long time for us to get anywhere with it. And so I suppose my thought would be the fact that we're the ones funding it, we ought to have, or partly we ought to have some way of checking whether the output that we're getting from the money that we're putting in is really being delivered. So you're happy that we are able to do that we're not sort of putting money into a thing, assuming that because it's got kite marks and check marks and rubber stamps of various sorts from other bodies, that gives us enough assurance that they are actually doing a good job for the people who ultimately we're trying to help.
I think the existing sort of kite marks that exist are the appropriate forms of quality assurance for us to be sort of, making sure we're in place and sort of basing our assurance on. I don't think that means therefore that we don't have an obligation to sort of, understand the client view. But I think that is generally going to be part of a sort of a broader approach to evaluation. So we do, for example, the Advice and Community Settings program, which is one of the programs looked at, the independent evaluation that we commissioned for that, did look at the extent to which clients felt their needs were sort of dealt with, and that they had come away from the the service that they had received fully satisfied. And I think the picture that sort of then tells us is that is often the case, but not always. And I think what you're getting at, and which again I don't think you would sort of resolve by having a separate layer of quality assurance in place, is that many people are coming in contact with these advice services with a real complexity of needs, some of which can be resolved through the relevant form of social welfare legal advice, but others of which might require sort of different public services, different these might services potentially provided by a local authority or a health body in the area, and they're clearly the ability to resolve issues that for which those services are relevant are beyond the ability of the advice, the advisor to deal with. So how you then unpick which element is the sort of the primary cause of the entirety of an individual's needs not having been resolved, I think becomes a tricky one to do via that route. What it does then, sort of, the question it does leave, and which I think is one that we will be taking forward, and I think the recommendation about making sure that the individual recommendations from evaluations are sort of logged and responses registered is a really helpful one. One of the things where what more can we, the GLA, be doing to help sort of do some of the knitting together between the advice services that we're helping to we're supporting the provision of, and then some of the local services that might be relevant and might also have a role to play.
Understood. Okay. Question from Assemblymember Harani.
Thank you. Just want to touch on some of the issues around the absence of standard templates and just a sort of missing or issues around record keeping, because it's not the only place on this stack of papers where this issue turns up. I'm just wondering what wider work is being done with the GLA group in general, just to make sure that we have proper record keeping. It's not small sums of money here that decisions are being made about. So what's being done to get that wider message out to all departments?
I can't speak to sort of initiatives that will be the realm of our governance and ICT teams. I should say I don't think the points around record keeping, again, the sort of the recommendations made in this review were very were welcome and constructive. I think the sort of the points that were made around sort of standard templates tended to be more around the independent evaluations that we've commissioned and how we are sort of just logging the responses to individual recommendations, and then similarly with partnership meetings. I think in terms of the actual the finance side of things and the allocation of money, I don't think there's been any suggestion that we've not been in compliance with our responsibilities on that front. And I think with the first recommendation, which was just around the sort of the template that delivery partners we were collecting results via. The template has always been there, and I think it was just a case of the consistency with which delivery partners have been completing it. That is something that we've worked with them and addressed, and already have a sort of solution in place for. So I think that specific recommendation has already been implemented essentially, and then the two around the sort of the evaluation reports and the partnership meetings, like I say, I think those are helpful recommendations about just standardizing the way that we're doing it. But yeah, I'm afraid I probably can't speak to sort of broader organization-wide initiatives on how the sort of finances are kept on top.
I know. That's why I was kind of looking towards the panel, maybe on that one.
I can try and answer that one. We've had a really recent review of our records management across the GLA. So there's a lot of impetus behind that now, and under every unit, we've got a responsible officer named as the records management officer. And we have an organisational-run records management policy that's much more robust than it might have been in the past. So that's something that we put in place over the last 6 months, and that's working its way through every unit. Accountability, we can do drop-in audits on any one of those aspects. So if we've got any concerns around any particular area where records management is not being maintained, we can really delve into that. So we've put that mechanism into place. I haven't tested it yet in terms of doing audit or asking our colleagues here from internal audit to do that, but we can. There isn't been any areas of major concern since we've put that in place that have come to light, though. So, but I'm not complacent about it. Whenever for example, I approve anything, I ask for all the records necessary in order to make that approval, and nothing gets approved unless I've got the documentation to support that.
Okay, thanks very much. That's reassuring. So I think that takes us to the end for now of the internal audit reports. So if I could ask the panel to note the contents of recent internal audit reports attached to the report at appendices 1 to 7. And we will return to appendix 8 as part of our exempt discussion at the end of the meeting. So that takes us now to item 7, which is the corporate risk register. We're joined by Enver, interim chief finance officer of the GLA. Are there any points where, so Enver, do you have anything that you would just wish to highlight? And panel members, do you have any questions that you wish to put?
So I'll give it a very quick intro, and I won't go through the whole risk register in detail. I just wanted to sort of draw attention, as I've done in the paper that's gone to the panel. There's the continual risk around inflation, which we've spoken about at the Budget Performance Committee as well. You'll see from the risk register that the risk hasn't gone up, the residual risk, but it hasn't gone down. Risk is, I think this inflationary risk will be with us for the foreseeable future. We have been increasing the mitigations, and in the latest budget round we've put some additional provision in around our capital programme in order to help us with some of the commercial viability of some of our construction areas. So the utilities have stopped going up, but the construction inflation hasn't. So for that reason we've added an extra mitigation. So that's not too apparent here. I won't dwell on too many of the other bits. The other one, just to draw your attention to, is risk number 10, which is around business continuity. This has been emphasised, and we have had a much more stronger business continuity exercise throughout the GLA. Still got a residual risk of 15, which is high, but I'm saying to the panel that I think the mitigations are much stronger than they were before. And then there's one last one that's been added, which is more around London's economic conditions. It was felt by us as a corporate management team that we should actually recognise this. It's not unique to one individual part of the GLA, but what we're saying is we're operating in this environment where it's recognised that the UK is now in recession, and what implications that might have on us as a strategic authority across London. So we're now tracking that as well. So the risk is only 9. It's not overly worrying, but we're keeping a much more closer eye on it. So it's really up to yourselves if you've got any questions.
Understood. I think the other change was that some of the working from home, the hybrid working that's been taken out on the basis that that feels now that's a business as usual thing, and we've got a handle on how that works, and
that's correct.
And the level of uncertainty.
So this is the highest level risk register that you see in front of you, but there are multiple layers of risk that we keep within the organisation. The hybrid working one has only just dropped down to tier 2, so it's still a corporate risk register, but not here anymore. But we will be keeping an eye on it. We've got the TFL1 London rollout, and we will make sure that once that is implemented effectively, then I'm assuming that risk will remain below the line. But apart from that, I think it's become business as usual now, the hybrid working.
Yeah, understood. Assemblymember Harani, I think you had a question.
Yeah, I mean, it just relates to the risk around inflation and interest rates, because I think a lot of the kind of officers I speak to at local authorities are a bit worried about the budget coming up, and I know it's election season as well. What may or may not be promised that's funded or not funded at officer level. Let's sort of trying to deal with this in a way that's not political. What are the sort of mitigations? Are you reviewing the register based on, you know, what happens or what doesn't happen in the budget?
We monitor it regularly. So even though we publish our budget monitoring quarterly, we look at this stuff every month. And the inflation, the Treasury team are constantly monitoring it. So we're also looking at the inward interest, which has been useful in this budget round at funding things. So some of it has been used to put some money aside into our capital programme reserve to offset other inflation. So we do have we're hedging at the same time. So when you have these pressures, we're also benefiting from it in a sort of a perverse way, but we get extra income in as well when we have that going out. I think what you're talking about isn't necessarily just an inflation issue. I think what can happen in the budget is a much wider issue, and we're making representations to the government around areas we think they should be funding, and so are the boroughs. And it's really what comes up. I mean, obviously there's a risk that there will be cuts to public services in order to fund a tax cut, which is in the public domain as a potential. I would be surprised if any of those public services are cut that impact on the 24-25 year, because that would undermine what government have just already announced in their full and final provisional settlement. So that's, by the term full and final, that means full and final. We wouldn't expect anything to come in to change government allocations in that financial year. Anything that impacts on future years, we will have to pick it up in the budget round.
I don't share that optimism, if I'll be honest, because I've you know, when I became a councillor in 2010, we had in-year budget cuts that year, that first budget. So I wouldn't.
If we have to deal with budget cuts, then we'll have to deal with it. It's not. If I said too much now, it might put the cat amongst the pigeons, and that's not. But we would then need to look at our discretionary spend and see what we would need to slow down or turn off if we really had to look at significant cuts.
I think what I'm trying to get at is the assurance from, let's say, a governance or practical perspective that you've got a review point there to sort of, you know, see what's announced and immediately review.
We do. For every fiscal event we do, of course we do. We have the economics team on standby. We literally review it the minute it comes out, and we are working together. And you know we have reserves, so if we have to, the reserves are there to cushion the immediate impacts and to look at how we bed it in. So I try and keep it calm personally, but yes, we do look at it. I wouldn't want to tell you that we all go into panic mode, but we're always aware of every fiscal event.
Reassuring to hear that no one's going into panic mode. That's always a good bit of risk management. I didn't see any other indications on the risk register, so if I can ask the panel to note the risk register. We now have 4 items with the Monitoring Officer, Rory McKenna, starting with the annual report of the Monitoring Officer regarding complaints about elected members. I don't know if you have anything to say on that, Rory, or whether the panel have any questions.
Chair, I don't. Obviously, it's a note and report. If you've got any questions, I'm happy to take them.
I don't see any questions, so we move on to item 9, monitoring the expenses and taxable benefits for the Mayor, elected members and senior staff. Are there any questions or comments?
Not for me.
Okay. Can we note, therefore, the taxable benefits and expenses incurred by the Mayor, London Assembly members and senior staff during the period April 2023 to December 2023? Noted. Excellent. Good work, team. Item 10, Register of Gifts and Hospitality. The Mayor of London, London Assembly members. Do members have any questions or comments on that?
None, Chair.
Okay, in that case, can I ask the panel to note the report? Item 11, Register of Gifts and Hospitality. Members of staff. Members have any questions or comments?
None.
Excellent. So if I can ask the panel to note the report. That sort of takes us to the end of the agenda, apart from we can now loop back to item, what was it, 6 or 7? Item 6, which was the internal audits and Appendix 8. Now you're hovering, Paul, to point out some wording that I need to read out, which is written, it's written at the back. Excellent. So, let's see, which wording am I reading out? This wording. So, can I ask the panel to agree, pursuant to Schedule 12A of the Local Government Act 1972, that the public and press be excluded from the meeting for the consideration of Agenda Item 6, Appendix 8, on the grounds that it involves the likely disclosure of exempt information as defined at paragraph 3 of that schedule, and it's considered that in all the circumstances of the case, the public interest in maintaining the exemption outweighs the public interest in disclosing the information? Agreed. Okay, so the broadcast will now be stopped and the public meeting concluded as we move into an exempt session. I don't know whether we have a vast number of members of the public. If there are, if they could now leave, so that ends the webcast. I'm just glancing around. I see 2 GLA officers, so I think we will allow them. Okay.
Stand up and declare them.
Okay, so I bang the gavel.
This is the broadcast from City Hall, the home of the Greater London Authority. Please stand by. This is the broadcast from City Hall, the home of the Greater London Authority. Please stand by. This is the broadcast from City Hall, the home of the Greater London Authority. Please stand by. This is the broadcast from City Hall, the home of the Greater London Authority. Please stand by. This is the broadcast from City Hall, the home of the Greater London Authority. Please stand by. This is the broadcast from City Hall, the home of the Greater London Authority. Please stand by. This is the broadcast from City Hall, the home of the Greater London Authority. Please stand by. This is the broadcast from City Hall, the home of the Greater London Authority. Please stand by. This is the broadcast from City Hall, the home of the Greater London Authority. Please stand by. This is the broadcast from City Hall, the home of the Greater London Authority. Please stand by. This is the broadcast from City Hall, the home of the Greater London Authority. Please stand by.